Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest in our series of webinars here at QC. My name is Chris Liversidge. I'm the CEO and founder here. And this webinar topic is on are your web analytics illegal? Which is perhaps a dry sounding topic, but there's been a huge amount of discourse over the last week exactly relating to this. And it's proving to be something of a hot topic amongst our audience and our customer base. And so we put this webinar session in to share the kind of state of play with everyone and discuss a little bit some of the measurement opportunities that presents for us as marketers, and also just helps clarify existing risk and touch on quite sensitive components like GDPR compliance within EU regulation. So a fair old bit to pack in. We have a Q&A function in this webinar system, so please don't hesitate to drop questions in. We'll isolate some time towards the end of the session to cover those. We're booked in for about 20 minutes. We can overrun slightly. I'll try not to because I'm very conscious of everyone's time. And we'll certainly make sure that we cover any unanswered Q&A in a follow-up slot, as we did in the last webinar in the series. Now we do have a poll, so let me just share my screen and I will bring up the poll topic. Here we go. So before we get started, this is the poll. You should see that pop up for yourselves and you can offer a response. But as it stands today, how confident do you feel that your web analytics are GDPR compliant? So it'd be quite interesting to see that poll. Please do try and just put in your initial response just now. We'll leave the poll open and I'll come back to it at the end of the session so we can share the outcomes with everyone. I don't think you can change your answers as we go through, but do please try and give your honest view as early as you can. So that said, I will move into the kind of guts of the webinar now. Before I do that, just a quick background about QC and myself. So QueryClick are a performance marketing agency covering everything to do with digital marketing, digital optimization. We've been going for 14 years this year. Previous to that, I helped build the performance marketing function for what became the largest independent search engine marketing agency in the world for a time before that was acquired by Publicis. And here at QueryClick, we've always worked with enterprise level customers, helping deliver high levels of performance. About 8 years ago, we started getting heavily involved in the world of attribution and data measurement and analytics. And we released a product called Corvidae to the market last year, which is the main reason why I'm here presenting on this related topic today. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the legality of digital measurement is very much up in the air right now. In fact, on Friday, we saw the US and EU announce a third attempt at agreeing a transatlantic data sharing agreement. Now, those of you who've been quite close to the topic of data compliance in the EU and how that relates to using analytics packages that interact with the US will know that the first attempt at this transatlantic agreement was the Safe Harbor Agreement. That was refined and followed up by what became termed the Privacy Shield Agreement. And this most recent announcement made literally just the last Friday doesn't yet have a name associated with it. And actually, it's still very light as an agreement on the detail. It was simply announced by President Biden. So clearly there's a little bit more that has to happen before we can get some understanding of if anything fundamental has changed in this transatlantic sharing agreement. Now, I'll go into a little bit of detail about what is important to change for that agreement to not be found illegal, as the previous two, both Privacy Shield and Safe Harbor, have been found. The key figure involved in this, who we'll come back to, is Max Schrems. He is a privacy advocate who has had key court cases passed, which are really the foundation stone of questions about privacy and respecting data privacy and rights of European and UK individuals. So let's go into the state of play. Given we know that there is a new agreement, but we don't know much detail about that, let's look at why the existing agreements have been found illegal and what the actual detail is around that. So helpfully, Google themselves put out a recent webinar 2 weeks ago discussing the recent finding in France that Google Analytics, as it currently exists, is illegal under data compliance laws in the EU. Now, that follows on from a previous finding in Austria, and both of those are founded on something called the Schrems 2 legal finding, which I'll cover in a bit more detail. What's relevant, though, is as it stands today, the Data Protection Authority has ruled that in its current state, Google Analytics is illegal from a GDPR compliance basis. Now, GDPR is a European initiative, and here in the UK, GDPR has been incorporated into the UK GDPR. There are two types of GDPR essentially as a result of that, but the UK GDPR integrates the European GDPR. So it is illegal in both the UK and Europe to use Google Analytics as it stands. So what is it that is illegal or is being found to be illegal by the European Courts of Justice and by the advocates following on from the Schrems 2 ruling? So in 2020, the Max Schrems case was brought and issued to the Court of Justice in Europe and found that the Privacy Shield framework, so that second agreement, does not provide safeguards for the data sharing to US data centers, and therefore is not compliant with GDPR as it stands. So that's the kind of crucial point. Where customer data becomes accessible in the US, it is not possible for the analytics provider to guarantee that that data will not be accessed by authorities in the US, and as a result of that, it is therefore illegal or not compliant under the GDPR regulation. So that is really the point at issue, and that is the area where identifying some detail about any new agreement will help us understand if it is likely to not be found illegal as the previous two agreements have been. So Google did respond to the finding in France that Google Analytics is illegal. It's decided to take a look at how it can become compliant and remove the data sharing aspect of Google Analytics, but only in its GA4 product. So it's worth clarifying at this point that there are two kind of key infrastructures that Google uses for analytics. The existing, fairly well established, very widely used Google Analytics, or Google Universal, as they renamed it, which exists in its free form and also in its paid 360 form. The main difference between those two being that the free version does not include some of the advanced features of 360 and also uses significant sampling. So typically it's only about 14% or less of your actual data that's being used to generate your reports if you're using the free version of Universal Analytics. So Google has gone on record to say it is not going to try and change the architecture of Universal. So that means that both GA360 and the free version of Google Analytics will remain illegal as it stands under GDPR compliance for any European or UK business. Instead, what Google is going to do is in the next month or so, and they haven't committed beyond that to a date, they intend to release functionality for you to select European data centers to be the only store of data for your GA4 deployment if you're already using that. So that would make the use of GA4 legal under the current understanding of GDPR and the Schrems 2 lawsuit. So there is a period of time clearly between now and the end of May when, regardless on if you're using GA4 or Universal, you will be illegal as currently defined by GDPR. Although it's probably unlikely that there will be significant legal action taken given the announcement on Friday that there will be a new data sharing agreement put in place. I suspect that the major courts will be interested to see the shape of that before there's any additional lawsuits being brought. The other thing that really came out of Google's announcement reacting to GA being found to be illegal is an acknowledgement that GA4 will be the only way that they are going to allow analytics going forward. So earlier in the month, Google announced that it was sunsetting the Universal Analytics version of GA. So in June 2023, Google will switch off that existing version of Universal Analytics, which we can see has been a real workhorse for many of us in providing analytics detail over the years. It has a lot of excellent pre-built reporting, which everyone's very familiar with, but it has some fundamental challenges, and not least of which are an inability to join any meaningful social activity that you might be undertaking using Facebook or TikTok or other data silos, and also being heavily dependent on requiring a cookie or an ID to unify sessions in any meaningful way, which is an important point that I'll come back to. GA4 shares those same challenges. The real difference between Universal Analytics and GA4 is GA4 uses something called an event stream architecture. So it's been built around a product that Google acquired called Google Firebase, principally used initially for app tracking. And that is a very robust, granular architecture to use, an event stream architecture. But it also suffers, as I say, from the same challenge that their Universal Analytics product has, of not being able to unify sessions where there isn't an ID for it to join into. It does attempt to use something called Google Signals, which is essentially if you are logged into a Google account on a particular device that is being tracked, Google will use that almost as another cookie to join your ID into the session that's being recorded. We haven't seen many results from that ourselves to make much of a difference between just a pure cookie-based approach as well. So just a couple of takeaways there, just to re-highlight. So July 1st, 2023, Google is sunsetting Universal Analytics, so the old workhorse of its analytics stream. That will remain illegal through until that point under GDPR as it stands right now. Google is attempting to make GA4 legal by preventing data being moved across to the US, and they plan to try and release that next month. So we'll need to stay close to that to see if that does occur. There was another pretty major announcement made last week by Google on this topic in their webinar series, where they indicated that GA4 is not going to provide audiences that can be used for Google Ads remarketing. So those of you watching who are responsible for retargeting activity, that's a pretty major announcement for Google to make. There has been an awful lot of discussion over the last week about GA4 and its ability to replace Universal Analytics, because it is a different architecture. It does not come out of the box with the kind of reports that we're all used to. It requires significant configuration efforts to track events that Universal Analytics would have tracked out of the box. It requires a lot of configuration, and also there is no data portability between Universal Analytics and GA4. So today there is a significant challenge for all of us as marketers if we are relying on Universal Analytics. If you want to have things like year-on-year reporting, you need to, make sure that you are on top of either your GA4 deployment or another analytics solution deployment today to take advantage of a smooth transition from that sunset date. So that is problematic. More problematic, however, is the fact that there will no longer be an option for building remarketing lists from GA4 audiences. Now, retargeting is often a high-performing part of the mix for many marketers, because it targets people who are already quite a long way down the consideration path as audiences. And losing that will likely have a very significant impact on our ability to deliver ROAS. And so I think it's worth looking at how we can build strategies that are not reliant on retargeting going forwards. That will be the subject of the next webinar in this series. There is an opportunity to sign up for that at the end of this slot, and also you can jump onto the QC site to find out how you can sign up for that as well. So quickly, before I move to Q&A, I can see there's been quite a few coming in. I just want to touch on what a compliant deployment, or what compliant deployment options exist today, because obviously, as I've said, as it stands, Google Analytics is not compliant. It has been found illegal, and so therefore there is, an existential risk for anyone using GA in their analytics stack. So the simple answer is there an alternative? Is yes. Clearly, we have spent 8 years developing quite a significant piece of technology in our Corvidae product. The Corvidae product is completely compliant from a GDPR perspective. We're actually also compliant for deployment in banking environment and so on. So there's extremely rigorous controls in place, not least on retaining the data within the EU where it's relevant, but also in the anonymity of the data that's being processed by the system. Now, I won't go into much of the detail about why we are able to provide that level of compliance and accuracy in this session. Our previous webinar did touch on that, and I believe that is also available for rewatching. And also, please feel free to put in a request, and we can go into a bit more detail on the technicals on that. But at a high level, by moving away from requiring an ID to stitch sessions together, which is what cookies are for, it's what Google Signals is for, using AI to model the probability that a session is a continuation of a previous session delivers significantly higher performance. So here you can see from a result nearly 8 years ago. At that point, we were able to get above 85% accuracy using AI instead of cookie-based systems. That's now up at 95% plus accuracy for our Corvidae platform, using some new AI that we co-developed in partnership with the leading data science university facility in EMEA. Compliance is an important part of the mix for all customers, and compliance does not mean that you should settle for a substandard or somehow second-rate measurement system. AI essentially allows compliant collection and 95% plus accuracy in your analytics. So as an improvement on GA, that's going from accuracy using a cookie-based system. In GA4 or Universal, up to 95% accuracy. So immediately it opens up some avenues for better optimization strategies. And as the topic of our next webinar will cover, strategies that don't require retargeting or third-party data to perform. So I'll leave that one for the next webinar. Do sign up for that if you're interested. I'll leave this QR code up for a second, and I will dig into the questions that have been coming in. And I will also just have a quick look at the poll that we have submitted. I think I can see here that it's a fairly resounding no to the confidence that analytics are GDPR compliant. So we had an 83% response saying that no, you're not compliant, and we're aware of it. That's very reassuring. I think it's good that we're all informed about the challenges and issues that using cookie-based systems and specifically also Google's systems, the level of risk that's introducing. That's a pretty compelling result. So if I just dig through some of these questions, I'll hit them up in no particular order. I think I'll try and give us a maximum of 5 minutes. I think we're overrunning already. First question in, just to confirm, GA is also illegal in the UK now. That's correct. So the GDPR compliance in the UK uses the European GDPR structure. So currently it's illegal in Europe, and as a result, it is also therefore illegal in the UK. So if you are a UK or a European business, then yes, Google Analytics is currently illegal. I think the webinar itself, by the way, just there was a question about availability. This webinar is recorded. We will be sharing this out, and absolutely we can also support follow-up questions. And obviously in the follow-up webinar as well, we'll be touching on some of these points as well and going into a bit more detail about what marketers will need to do. I've got a question in from, which is asking if Google are turning analytics into a money-making scheme, as all companies will have to move to the paid version to be legal in Europe. That's from Adele. Adele, actually, it's slightly worse than that. So the paid version is also illegal. I maybe need to be clearer about that. GA360 is the paid version of Universal Analytics. That is illegal, and it will remain illegal right the way through until it is sunset in June 2023. GA4 is the version of Google Analytics that Google is going to attempt to make not illegal at some point in May, but we have yet to see that actually delivered. So we still need to keep our eyes on that. Is it a money-making scheme? Well, I think there's probably more credence that some of the third-party cookie replacement that Google's proposing in its topics architecture is a much more of a money-making scheme, and that is something we'll touch on in the next webinar, which will talk about strategies to avoid issues caused by reliance on cookies and third-party data. Final question I think I can cover right now, and then I will wrap up because we'll be 5 minutes over at that point. How can I get buy-in from my company to move away from Google Analytics? So that's a great question. At the moment, Google Analytics, as the majority of us experience it, which is the Universal Analytics version, is going away anyway. It's going away in June 2023, and it is not going to allow any data portability into even their own system. So GA4 will not be able to take data that's been collected in the older version of Google Analytics. So that means that today already the clock is ticking for putting in place an analytics solution that you will be using and you will be obliged to use certainly from the middle of 2023. So there's a pretty good lever there for getting buy-in on moving away from Google Analytics generally. And I would argue that the fact that Google Analytics is really only about 20% accurate because of its reliance on cookies means that putting on the table a solution that offers much higher levels of accuracy, such as Corvidae, which is clocking in at 95% accuracy, is absolutely the way to go. There's clearly a lot more on that, and we can pick that one up again. I do think we're running time now, so I will call it here. I'll just say thank you to everyone for attending. Hopefully that was useful, and there's a really good general understanding about the legality or otherwise of your current analytics deployment. Please do stay in touch with us and join in our future webinars. We have a whole series going on, and hopefully it will be just as interesting as this one has been. So thank you everyone for your time. We'll leave it there.